Yo, what is up guys, it's Ghost here. Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're not going to be reviewing Battlefield 2042. We're not going to be reviewing Season 7. We are going to be taking a look at reviewing DICE and whether or not their leadership has finally managed to turn the sinking ship around that was Battlefield 2042, hopefully culminating in a good Battlefield game releasing in 2025 or beyond that. Now, I found this absolutely fascinating. There is a website called Glassdoor, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Glassdoor, what you can do there is leave a review for the company that you work for, so you can divulge how much you get for your salary, you can divulge what you liked about working for the company, what you didn't like about working for the company, and you can do it anonymously, so that when other people apply for jobs and they're maybe thinking of applying for your company, they can get some reviews of just what it's like to work there. So, as you may have guessed, we're going to go on that website and take a look at DICE. Guys, as always, if you do enjoy the content here on the channel, hit up the subscribe button, hit up the like button if you like the video down below as well. Both of those things really help with the algorithm and are ever so much appreciated. Update 7.1 should be coming fairly soon, and then in May we're going to be getting 7.2 with the new vehicle and the new map, and I will of course be covering everything related to that here on the channel. So if that's something that interests you, then go ahead. And as always guys, thank you so much for your support. So we all know the story of what happened at DICE. Towards the end of Battlefield 5, there was pretty much a mass exodus of talent from the company. Battlefield 2042 had some great difficulties in its development. There were some management difficulties, there was COVID, there were difficult things with the engine that just really made working with it an absolute pain in the rear. And all of these things culminated in the release of Battlefield 2042, which was, as we all know, absolutely abysmal. Since then, they have done great things to fix up the game, and now it's in a pretty good spot. It's still not what I would call the best Battlefield game ever, but it's definitely playable, and I feel like I can recommend it, especially when it's being put on discount to my viewers. Now, shortly after Battlefield 2042 launched, it seems the leadership at DICE and EA realized that something was wrong, because a very large restructuring took place. Many people left the company, maybe some of them were fired, we don't really know. So we saw David Berlin leaving, we saw Forzi Mesmar leaving, who was like the Candy Crush guy, and a bunch of others. And then Vince Zampella came in, he took over as the head of the Battlefield franchise, and of course Laura Miele took over as the president of EA. So it's fair to say a lot of things have changed. Now, I'm sure that me and you were hoping that this is all going to be for the betterment of the next game, and we're going to get an absolute banger of a Battlefield title. But up until now, I've only really been able to speculate on just how things have been working inside at DICE until I read a lot of these reviews over on Glassdoor. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to read these reviews from the most recent, and then we're going to go back in time. So we're going to start with reviews that are fairly recent, then we're going to go and take a look at the reviews that were left whilst Battlefield 2042 had just been launched, while they were trying to basically get the game, you know, working in decent working order, let's say. And then we're going to end with some of the reviews before the game even launched, when they were developing the game, because that stuff is really, really eye-opening, and I really do recommend sticking around for that. Okay, so this is the first review. This is basically the most recent one. It's from August 22nd, 2023, and this person gives the company 3 stars. You know, pretty decent. Overall, I will say DICE have a 3.9 stars out of 5, so they are a pretty good company. And this guy says, very employee-friendly, work-life balance, and people are smart and nice to work with. The cons, though: planning is bad, leadership does not know what to do clearly, and do not make decisions. This guy gives it 4 stars and says, great place to work, he is a developer. And again here on the cons, they say they need to trust teams more and allow for devs to find creative solutions, sometimes a bit too top-down decision making. Here's another one: hard to get promoted, hard to have input. And then another one: management are slow to recognize and reward its employees. And this one here is particularly eye-opening. So this is from the 8th of August 2022, and for time reference, this is around the time just before Season 3 of Battlefield 2042 is launching, so the game is certainly well on its way to basically being the Battlefield 2042 that we know today, largely fixed up. There were certain features that had yet to be put in there, but you know, we'd already gotten Season 1, we'd already gotten Season 2, and this is what this person had to say. So they do give DICE 4 stars out of 5, and they say fantastic people, but have drifted from the ideal. So for pros here, they say, with all my experience with the people at DICE, I have found them a combination of courteous, professional, talented, and very smart bunch of folks. In short, find people to make a product with. This is a company founded on solid roots. However, they really do need to get back to their core principles, which have provided us with top-tier content for decades. Then we get to the cons. The scale of the corporate pressure on their internal infrastructure kind of misses the point of the true spark that comes from creative collaboration. For DICE, everything fits into a category, and there are rules for all the categories. An upstream creative contribution usually finds dead ends, and visibility on that process is opaque. It is very unclear on how to steer or even influence this in any meaningful way, and advice to management: this ship is really slow to turn. Artists need more room to find the spark, producers need a good two-way channel to get that back into the game vision, and it all needs to be transparent. This is more a communication problem than anything else. So what this person is saying here is that even if they have a good idea, they don't really feel like they have any way to get it up the chain of command. You know, maybe they go to their project leader and they can't really make a creative contribution to the game in that way. They just aren't really being heard. And you may well say, well, maybe that's just this one person saying that, maybe they're like a disgruntled employee or whatever, but we see this echoed again and again in the cons section of almost every single review here. So the general consensus here seems to basically be the same. DICE is a really nice company to work for. The people there are really nice, the people there are talented, but they just don't seem to be listened to by the management. And as we get even further back in time, you're going to see these sentiments echoed even more. Okay, so this next one is from February the 9th, 2022, and now we're sort of getting into the era where Battlefield 2042 has just launched to critical failure. So this is around 3 months after the game launched here. The messiest company I've ever worked for. So the pros here: good pay, it's fun to be in the industry if you love video games, it's a good name to have on your CV. Cons: the horrible management and decision making is abysmal. I have almost 20 years of experience, and I've never worked in such a disorganized place where we redo the same thing over and over again due to a lack of vision and effective decision making. This contributed to the worst work-life balance I had in my career so far. And the advice to management: my best advice would be to restructure the management, which was of course what we saw happen with Vince Zampella coming in. So hopefully these management problems have all been ironed out here. This one is from January, around the same time. Again, the cons here: management have forgotten what a Battlefield game is. Management ignore valid feedback and criticism from the developers. Advice to management: listen to your developers. This guy here is a gameplay programmer, and he says management has no idea what they are doing. Here's another one: sometimes it feels like dev sentiment is not really heard by the publisher or not acted upon. Okay, we're about to get into the really juicy ones here, which are during the development of Battlefield 2042, before the game had even launched. So we're going to get some inside information here from what the people working at DICE, what they felt like, what they were going through as the game was being developed, and really overall how they weren't listened to at all. And I hope you guys can see, as we've gone back in time here, that the first reviews that I read were nowhere near as bad as the reviews that I've started reading now. So it's obvious that as time has gone on, the management at DICE has improved, it has gotten better. It seems that Vince Zampella and co have started to right the ship, and things in that regard are looking better for the next game. But I really wanted to put this out there because I think a lot of people are of the opinion that nobody at DICE is talented enough to make a good Battlefield game. Nobody knows what they're doing there, but a lot of these reviews are showing that the very people working on the game, the programmers, the 3D artists, producers, everybody just trying to pitch in and make the game, all know how to make a good Battlefield game, and they seem to have good ideas about it, but it's obvious here that they simply weren't listened to by the management. So whenever you are, you know, throwing hate at Battlefield 2042, and if you still feel sad about the state that the game launched in, you're totally, you know, entitled to feel that way. This is at least food for thought here, that it seems like it was more of a managerial issue, not just at EA, but largely it seems here at DICE, really more so than at EA, which is kind of eye-opening for me. Okay, so this one is March 27th, 2021, about 5 months or so, maybe 6 months or so before the game launches. By the way, again here, this guy is a 3D artist. He gave them 4 stars out of 5, and he says the pros are friendly colleagues and atmosphere and good benefits. So it seems that the workplace in general is a really, really nice, solid place to work at. It just seems that the cons are due to the managerial issues for the game. So it says here, top-heavy decision-making. Most of the time, it feels like someone high above decided something and that is the law. When employees bring up feedback, it's already too late because EA already signed off on it. Problem is that they tend to sign off on something completely overscoped. Advice to management, be agile, listen to developers more, don't make games based on trailers, make trailers based on games. My god, words to live by. This one here is entitled Fun Workplace Clunky Engine, and this guy is a software engineer, and he says the engine is very unstable, things break everywhere all the time. The infrastructure is a bit iffy. For example, we just have one branch for a game, with everyone essentially pushing to master, and then the latest version to use isn't head, which is always broken, but rather the last successful nightly build, which you get with a script. The career progression is slow, experience is measured by years in the industry rather than performance. So we also heard that when the game released that the engine just really wasn't up to scratch and that some of the people who knew how to work with the engine and basically fix it up had already left the company, and that was a big source of frustration for the developers as well, and this really confirms it, I think. So now we're a year before release, October 2020. This person says, great place to work at, but different from what it used to be. Decline of push for leading the industry over the past years, getting more and more corporate and less creative freedom. This person here says, great benefits but stressful work environment. The work environment can often be toxic with bad displays of behavior, especially in the leadership ranks. There is a general lack of compassion from the top down, where you're really made to feel like you're just a resource that is there to deliver results. A lack of clarity and direction in the products makes the development process chaotic, frustrating, and leads to crunch. This guy is a senior concept artist. He says good salary and bonus options, and cons, a lot of politics, and having to work with EA. That's understandable. Now, I have definitely saved the most interesting one until last. So this is from August 28th, 2019. Now, the final update, the final piece of content for Battlefield 5 actually launched in October 2019. So this is about 2 months before the final piece of content for Battlefield 5 launches, and then consequently after that, they cancel the game. And of course at this point they are hard at work working on Battlefield 2042, and that's what this designer here is referring to, and he says stay away for the time being. So let's start with the pros first, because the cons are significantly longer. So he says good work hours and pay. Production figured out a better alternative to crunching that is much easier on the body. Of course, sometimes overtime still has to happen, but at least it was bearable, and unfortunately still mostly fell on the engineers. Mostly friendly co-workers that simply wish to make great games. Frostbite was pretty awesome to work with. Well, that's interesting. And co-workers were pretty good at helping you get up to speed on using it. So again, this guy echoes the same sentiments, that the people there are nice, they want to make great games, and that's sort of everybody's vision. Except for the management, it would seem. So here come the cons. Cronyism and nepotism are huge problems. The previous generation of leadership is reaching retirement age and began passing the torch over a year ago. How they selected the current generation is not clear, but it isn't working at all. What features make it into the game or get development time isn't dependent on how they'll improve the game, but on who has your back. This is especially troublesome because current leadership, or rather the couple of people at the top, is obsessed with executing their vision at the expense of everything else. Being a visionary isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they have failed to inspire confidence in that vision. Instead, they did the exact opposite by forbidding negative criticism and discussion as their way of addressing low morale and skepticism. This, among leadership's other consistently backwards ideas and policies, just reduced morale more and more. The worst part was that it wasn't hard to see why their vision wouldn't work. Leadership was just stubborn and refused to back down or admit that they are wrong, even after negative reception from nearly all parts of the process. Instead, leadership chased their vision even harder. So this guy goes on here, but just let me take a moment to say, he has to be talking about some of the questionable design choices with Battlefield 2042, like putting specialists in the game, and it sounds here like there was a mass opposition to a lot of these design choices, and the leadership basically just turned around and said, we don't care, and they wanted to push through their vision no matter what. So he continues here, leadership's drive to fulfill their vision, despite objections from multiple departments and people, was disheartening, and they were also very sensitive to anyone who didn't get with the program. People who agreed with leadership were pulled out of the production process and instead helped promote leadership's vision in public-facing materials. They did this to steer player perception in their favor and then used champion the player's view to enforce a sense of legitimacy. Implementation of features was then handed to team members that already had other tasks on their plate. Gallows humor, which is kind of like really ironic humor in like a hopeless situation, has been used to cope with how painful playtests of leadership's ideas were. Leadership loved to manipulate data when there were creative disagreements. They cherry-picked a limited subset of feedback from social media channels that aligned with their vision and insisted that it was actually from the overwhelming majority. It's easy for them to do this since players parroted leadership's propaganda. It hurt to be sidelined in favour of half-baked suggestions from strangers that mostly piggybacked off leadership's already absurd ideas. It hurt even more watching the points of failure people indicated actually lead to the exact disaster they warned leadership about, and to top it off, leadership drew terrible conclusions on where mistakes were made and will undoubtedly repeat them again. And they most certainly did. Despite the protests from the people below them, leadership slammed their decisions through with near fanatical conviction. Unsurprisingly, these antics and the overall general lack of confidence have led to dozens of people leaving. Those vacancies will inevitably be filled by people loyal to leadership regardless of competence. Making another blockbuster hit like past titles isn't completely out of reach, but leadership is going in the exact opposite direction. Wait a few years for the current leadership and their cronies to be promoted to positions of irrelevance, then consider coming here. If the company survives that far into the future, maybe producing wildly successful games will become possible again. And here is his advice to the management. The current leadership is clearly not ready to lead. Just because you like another employee does not mean they should be senior in roles that they do not understand. Regardless of how much experience they have elsewhere, they need to be placed in roles they can perform. Be realistic about your plans. Massively increasing scope when we've already agreed on deadlines is a recipe for disaster. Scope creep kills projects and is something to avoid instead of something to practice. If you dismiss someone's fears and it becomes a reality, you should probably take what they're saying more seriously, especially if it's coming from more than one person. The previous generation being present and taking the hands-off approach is admirable, but not working. Intervene before it's too late. Otherwise, current leadership's drive to prove itself will spell certain disaster for everyone still here. Stop making overly idealistic assumptions about how our players actually play. There is a giant disconnect between the ideal leadership chases and how the game works out in the wild. Continuing to design games around some fantasy will only end in failure. And that's exactly what happened. And to add a little bit of credit and legitimacy to what this guy is saying, he has 82 of these helpful posts here. So it seems like a lot of his co-workers have gone and found this post on Glassdoor and they've marked it as helpful. So this is like one of the top posts, essentially, if you want to rank it by most helpful. And it really just feels like everybody else has been echoing exactly what this person is saying here, it's just that they've worded it fantastically. So hopefully you guys understand a little bit more about exactly what went on at DICE whilst Battlefield 2042 was being developed, whilst the game was being released, and then beyond that, and why this huge managerial restructuring came in with the likes of Vince Zampella. It seemed that there was just a massive click at the top of the management scheme where if you weren't their friend, then you had no say in the project, and some of these friends of the managers basically had no business being there at all and weren't qualified to do the job that they were in. So hopefully Vince and co have rectified that situation. Of course, recently we have seen the studio creative director Craig Morrison leaving. We've also seen Marcus Leto leaving. We don't really know the reasons behind that. I don't think we should be too, quick to jump to conclusions and just kind of say that it's all EA's fault there and it's like managerial problems. It could well be that maybe they were out of line, maybe they just weren't a fit for whatever the vision of the next Battlefield game is, and they had good cause to let them go. I don't really know what happened, you know, we can speculate about that back and forth, and we'll most likely never know. In any case, judging from these reviews here, it seems that DICE is in much better hands than it was when Battlefield 2042 was being developed and launched, so I am crossing my fingers that all of the management problems have been fixed, all of the spots from people who left the company have been filled with people who are able to do their jobs, know what they're doing, and are passionate about building a good Battlefield game. Guys, I know this was a super long video today, but you know, I thought this was just something that needed to be documented. A lot of you may say, why are you drudging up all of this old stuff now? DICE have moved past the launch of Battlefield 2042. It's not the same company anymore. And believe me, I am incredibly thankful and happy that that is the case. But a lot of this stuff pretty much just confirms what I've been thinking and a lot of you guys have assumed for the past few months and years. And sometimes taking a look at the past is a surefire way to ensure that you don't end up in the same place again in the future. Thank you guys as always for watching the video, leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.